Hey, math students, yesterday in class, we worked on multiplying a fraction by a whole number. And so really, you know that multiplication is just repeated addition. So if you can add fractions together, you can multiply fractions by a whole number. Today, we're going to take that a step further, and we're going to multiply a mixed number, which remember is the combination of a whole number and a fraction, by another mixed number or even by a fraction. So let's take a look at an example problem. So we're going to go to my whiteboard here. And what I want us to do is take a look at a rectangle problem. So if we take a look at, say we're wanting to carpet a hallway, for example, and we want to know how many square feet or how many square yards in this case of carpet we're going to need. So let's just say that my carpet, if this represents my carpeted area, let's just say that my carpeted area is 1.5 yards by 6 2/3 of a yard. So my length is 1.5. My length is 6 2/3 yards. My width is 1.5 yards. And I want to know what my area is, or I want to know how many square yards of carpet I need. So my problem, if we look at the standard algorithm, my problem is simply 6 2/3 multiplied or times 1.5. And so that's going to give me my area. So when you're working with a mixed number like this, the easiest strategy to do is what we call area model. And if you remember, area model is just one method of multiplying two numbers together. So with our area model, we're going to take these numbers and we're going to break this apart into easier numbers. So if you look at the number 6 2/3, I know that that can be separated out into 6 plus 2/3. So I'm separating my whole number from my fraction. And so you can take this on our area model and you can separate this out. You could say, okay, let's divide this rectangle up into two easier rectangles because I can work with the number 6 and I can work with 2/3. So the length of this is 6. This is the length here. And this is 2/3 of a yard. So the length of this is 2/3. And then I can separate my 1.5 out into 1 plus 1/2, because I know that 1 plus 1/2 is 1.5. So that's my number there. So if I separate this out and I have 1.5, let me separate this rectangle out like this. So I've taken my whole area and I've separated this out now into 4 separate rectangles. The distance here is 1 and the distance here is 1/2, okay? So now I have 4 separate rectangles. So if I take a look at just this rectangle first, so if this is the rectangle that I first want to look at, I can say, okay, the length times width gives me the area. So I know that this particular rectangle is a 6 by 1 yard rectangle. Well, I know I can do 6 times 1 in my head. I know that 6 times 1 is 6. So the area of this first rectangle here is 6 yards, 6 square yards. So I'm going to bring this number down here. This is going to be 6. I know that then this is 1/2. So this is going to be 1/2 times this length. This is 2/3. Let me use a different color. So I know that this is going to be 1/2 times 6. Well, I can do this in my head as well. 1/2 times 6, or in other words, what's half of 6? Half of 6 is 3, okay? In other words, if I have 1/2, so if I have, say, a square and I have half of that square, and I multiply that by 6. So here's 1, here's 2, here's 3 halves, here's 4 halves, here's 5 halves, and here's 6 halves. So what do I have? Well, I have 1, 2, 3 holes. So that's how I'm getting 1/2 times 6 equals 3. So the area of this section of my carpet is 3. So I'm going to add these together because I'm adding these two areas, these two squares together. So this is going to be 6 plus 3. Now let's move over to our fractions. This is where things get a little bit more difficult because we have to think a little bit more. So the area of, if I look at this rectangle now, this is 2/3 across. So this is going to be 2/3 times, what's this length? Well, I look over here, it's 1. Oh, I can do this, 2/3 times 1. Well, I know that anything times 1 is going to be that same number. So this area is 2/3. So the area of this area here is 2/3. So I'm going to add 2/3 down here. And then finally, let's look at this particular section here. So this section here is a rectangle that's 2/3, because that is the same as up here. So this is 2/3 times this area. Well, this is 1/2. So 2/3 times 1/2. Now, this you could probably do in your head because remember, you're saying what's half of 2/3? Well, 2/3 would look like this. If I use a pie chart, 2/3 looks like this. Half of that, of course, is going to be this section. Half of that is going to be 1/3. Okay. Now, if you didn't know that and you wanted to work this out, you know that in any multiplication, any fraction, you can multiply together. So 2/3 times 1/2. I know that I just multiply across both my numerator and my denominator. So I know that 2 times 1 is 2 and 3 times 2 is 6. Well, wait a minute. I thought it was 1/3. How am I getting 2/6? Well, remember, 2/6, you have to reduce. So if I reduce this, 2/6, I know that both numbers are divisible by 2. So I can divide by 2/2, which is like dividing by 1, which doesn't change the value of the fraction. 2 divided by 2 is 1, and 6 divided by 2 is 3. There's my 1/3. So this is going to be 1/3, which makes sense that 2/3 times 1/2, or 1/2 of 2/3 is another way to say that problem, is going to be 1/3. So now I want to add this down here, 1/3. So now I go back to my original problem. And so 6 2/3 times 1 1/2 is the same thing as 6 plus 3 plus 2/3 plus 1/3. Now, let's break this down then. Let's combine these terms. I know that 6 plus 3, those are my whole numbers. That's going to be 6, 7, 8, 9. So that's going to be 9 is my whole number. I know that 2/3 plus 1/3, well, my denominator is the same. So I can just add my numerator. 2 plus 1 is 3. So this is going to be 3/3. Well, think about what 3/3 represents. Go back to my thirds diagram here. If I have 3/3, there's 1/3, 2/3, and there's 3/3. That's one whole. So this is going to be then 9 plus 1, which I know that 9 plus 1 is 10. So the area then, this whole thing, and if you notice, I took this whole thing, I broke it up into 4 smaller rectangles, and then I just added them all together here to get my 10. So 6 2/3 times 1 1/2 equals 10 yards squared, or 10 square yards. So hopefully that helps. If you need to go back and watch portions of this video again to help you with today's problem, make sure you do that. I want you to model the multiplication. Don't just try to work out the multiplication of the mixed numbers, but model the multiplication. I hope this helps. Have a great rest of your day, and jump on our Zoom today if you have any questions whatsoever on today's work. Thanks, and have a great day.